In December of 2015, a set of incomplete blueprints mysteriously appeared at an auction house. The inconspicuous blueprints quickly caught the attention of several anonymous collectors who fought over the item, surpassing the original estimated price by almost 500% and selling for $27,000. Once sold, it went into the hands of a private collector, never to be seen again. These blueprints would give the public their first glimpse at the cancelled plans for Walt Disney's second theme park. The plans showed a Disney park featuring favorites such as Peter Pan, brand new attractions such as the Lewis and Clark Adventure Ride, and would have been the first home for now Disney staples, including the Haunted Mansion, all of which would have been housed inside a massive indoor theme park on the banks of the Mississippi. For Review Time, I'm Luke, and this is the story of Walt Disney's Riverfront Square, the cancelled indoor Disneyland. On the 17th of July 1955, Walt Disney opened his masterpiece of Disneyland. After years in the making, Walt's dream of opening a place where parents and children could have fun together were finally realized. After the opening, Walt announced that he would build no further Disney parks after Disneyland. But a meeting with the mayor of St. Louis, Missouri 8 years later in 1963 would ultimately change his mind. Walt Disney himself grew up in Missouri, in both Marceline and Kansas City. Even though Walt was born in Chicago, he always considered Missouri as his home. I feel that my roots are in the great state of Missouri, and that I am a Missourian in every sense of the word. I guess you can gather from this that I still have a fine warm spot for the old home state. For the St. Louis bicentennial year in 1964, the city was undergoing a major development of the downtown area. After demolishing many city blocks to make way for the Busch Stadium, the same Busch of Busch Gardens theme parks, the city looked to demolish a further 2 blocks north of the stadium to create a dining/shopping district on the Mississippi River, which would be themed to historical St. Louis. A major attraction planned for this complex was a 360-degree Circarama theater, and so the city approached Walt Disney to create the film for this attraction. After having experienced previously on the America the Beautiful Circle Vision film for the 1958 Brussels World's Fair, and the Italia 61 film for an exposition in Turin. But this was Walt Disney. After considering the proposal for a few weeks, his response to the mayor was to either go big or go home, and the initial plans for this quaint entertainment district eventually morphed into a giant 5-story indoor theme park. After a meeting on March 28th of 1963 with the Civic Center Redevelopment Corporation, Walt, not wanting to take any risks, immediately assigned Harrison Buzz Price to create a feasibility study for the project. Thankfully, it reported that the project could be modestly profitable from visitorship of both locals and tourists. Even though Disney was incredibly busy with the 1964 World's Fair at the time, a topic we've covered in the past, on November 18th at a press conference, Walt Disney outlined his vision for Riverfront Square, to be designed and operated wholly by the Disney Company. All of the blue sky project ideas had been refined into a 5-story enclosed building which would cover 2 full city blocks. Enclosing the building allowed it to operate 365 days a year, no matter the weather. Walt had famed Imagineer Marvin Davis design the initial plans for the project, just as he had done for Disneyland 10 years earlier. The finalized plans called for a project budget of $40 million, with around 25,000 guests per day expected to come through the gates. The central theme for Walt Disney's Riverfront Square would have been the history of St. Louis itself, as well as stories of the Mississippi and the Old West. Walt stated that Missouri and its history are important to me. There's a lot of opportunities to do things exciting about the state, the Mississippi River, Mark Twain, things both entertaining and educational. I'm not interested in a tourist trap. I want something we and St. Louis can be proud of. Some of the attractions that would have been found inside the park included the Lewis and Clark Adventure Dark Ride, where you travel through the exciting tales of the titular men with the stories told through dioramas and audio animatronics. A bayou boat ride, which would have started going through a Louisiana swamp before traveling down a waterfall and then back up a waterfall at the end. Whilst this may sound familiar, it wouldn't have featured pirates, but alligators and other wildlife. Pirates would have been found in the park, however, though, in the Jean Lafitte Adventure Ride, which would have seen guests following the adventures of the famous pirate in a walkthrough attraction like the one originally planned for Disneyland before it was reworked into the classic Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Another, now familiar sounding attraction would have been a haunted house, which would have started in a stretching room which would have taken guests into the basement of the mansion and into a room of illusions, with ghosts and stories based on known Missouri ghost tales. At one stage of the plans, there was also calls for classic Fantasyland dark ride attractions such as Peter Pan and Snow White to be part of the park, though Walt Disney couldn't decide whether he wanted to include his famous characters or if they would simply distract from the historical nature of the project. The main entertainment option in the park would have been an audio animatronic stage show in the style of the Country Bear Jamboree, which would have featured characters closely aligned with Missouri, such as Teddy Roosevelt, Charles Lindbergh, and well-known sports stars. Other attraction ideas tossed around for the park included the Circle Vision Theatre film, a roller coaster thrill ride through river caves, a Native American canoe ride, and even a live bird aviary. Other than these attractions, the park would have also featured numerous restaurants, shops, and live performances spread out around the park, which would have been split between two themed areas, one representing St. Louis at the turn of the 20th century, and the other representing New Orleans before the Civil War. Of course, if you go to St. Louis today, you won't find a Disney theme park, much less an almost entirely original indoor one. So why didn't this plan go ahead? The much discussed myth online is that Walt scrapped the plans himself after Bush and he feuded over alcohol sales. After Walt's press conference announcing the plans, Bush publicly said that any man who would build something like this and then not serve beer and liquor is crazy. Walt initially stuck to his guns and announced that alcohol wouldn't be served anywhere in the complex, no matter what Bush thought, as it was his feeling that in a family venue, alcohol had the tendency to encourage rowdies. Ultimately, though, Walt had to adjust his plans to create adult-only areas of the park that would have served alcohol, due to the chairman of the Civic Center Redevelopment Corporation declaring that any plans developed by either Mr. Disney or anyone else would not be approved if they did not make provision for the sale of beer, wine, and liquor in the restaurants and other appropriate entertainment facilities in the area. But all of this truly had nothing to do with why the project was cancelled. Ultimately, it's a bit more boring than a mythical dispute over alcohol, and had to do with what the St. Louis Council was willing to do for the project. Disney believed that they should only be responsible for the show elements of the plans, including the design and building of the rides, creation of the theming, and overall scope of the project. This meant that they expected St. Louis to provide the massive building, parking garages, land improvements, and sell the land to Disney at the bargain basement prices they were currently getting in Florida. St. Louis wasn't just responsible for the building shell either. They were to deliver to Disney a facility completely ready, with all of the walls and infrastructure prepared for Disney to move in. However, the city didn't quite see eye to eye, only agreeing to build the outside shell, leaving everything inside up to Disney. In July of 1965, St. Louis City and Disney jointly announced the cancellation of Walt Disney's Riverfront Square. In a joint statement, it was said that we were asked to try to develop a major attraction, having the impact on the St. Louis area of a Disneyland. We suggested at the outset that a project of that scope and size and cost might well prove difficult to accomplish, due to a number of imponderable factors. Such has proved to be the case. Just a few months later in November, Disney would officially announce its plans to build Walt's true second theme park project in Central Florida, with a lot of the plans for this Mississippi project being reworked for this new Magic Kingdom. Around a year later, Walt sadly passed away before he ever got to open a second Disney theme park somewhere in the country he was so patriotic for. But in some ways, that's what makes his original park so special. Over the years after Walt's passing, Riverfront Square would no longer be the only waterfront Disney park in the planning stages, including the cancelled Port Disney and our close to home, cancelled Disney Wharf at Sydney Harbour. But who knows? Without this project, we may never have gotten the Haunted Mansion or Pirates of the Caribbean. So whilst these mysterious blueprints are now in the hands of a private collector, I'm glad for a short moment we were able to look at them and get a glimpse into Walt Disney's Riverfront Square. For ReviewTyme, I'm Luke. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing.